let's talk about using cave effects on and off inside of our games. Alright everyone, we're going to talk about how we can add effects and of course multiple audio buses so that we can have of course set up audio settings, and you can set up all that stuff of course separately, but having different audio buses is what allows you to have those different audio settings. You know, when you go into a game, you got sound effects, you've got music, you have the master volume, and maybe you have voices as a separate thing. All of those are individual audio buses. And I'm going to show you two methods here that you can use when we go into something, say maybe a cave area, and you want everything to be echoing or like a reverb sound. Maybe you want to add some delay into it, whatever. But I'll show you two ways that we can handle having or turning that kind of stuff on when we go into that area, and then of course turning it back off when we exit. So the first thing you're going to need is of course an audio bus to use this with. And if you just go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a tab called audio. And with that open, you'll see that I have two audio buses here. They both have reverb, and that is only because method 2, I'm going to use one audio bus, and in method 1, we're going to use two different audio buses. Now, I don't, I'd say recommend, I suppose, but it's going to be very situational, of course. Method 1 is going to be a little easier, but I don't see a reason why you couldn't really use method 2. But again, this might just come down to some situational examples, or some situation of your game and your maybe area, the way you've got things set up. Alright, and all I have inside of my scene is I just have a control for my root node, doesn't really matter. And that's got a script on it, which is the one that you can see here on the screen. And then I just have an audio stream player. Doesn't matter if it's 2D, 3D, or just the regular stream player. That has no effect on this at all. And I just have a crowd talking sound effect that I just found on YouTube and downloaded. I'll play it right here. And I can see that audio is not going through. Give me 2 seconds. It should be this one. And now you should be able to hear. Alright, so I just have that, and I'm gonna activate or simulate my going through an area or going into a cave and out of a cave, etc. Just by pressing a button through an action that I set up on the input mapper. Alright, so what's important here is, if you want to look at both of these methods, is our first one is going to use both the sounds bus with no effects and our cave sounds bus there with the reverb on and whatever else you want to put on. If it's a cave sound, maybe you want to put add a little delay or something in there. And the second method is only going to use the sounds bus with the reverb effect turned off. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump in. And audio effect 1 is there, and I'm just going to go ahead and mute audio effect 2. And I'm going to play this. I'm going to let you hear the difference and the final result that we kind of have going in here. And I'm going to press the button. And then press the button again as if we leave the cave. So you can see we had that reverb going on and off there in that essence. And in that version, we're going with effect 1. So I'll just go ahead and open that up. And what we're doing here is, of course, I told you that I have my thing activating based on a button press instead of course, walking into a cave or out of a cave, but it's the same premise. The only difference is you'd have, instead of having this code in here as on a button press, of course, you'd have it when and the player enters an area 2D, for example, right? That way, when the player enters the area, they must have gone into the cave, or however you set that up. Maybe you set up two areas, so you have one on the exit and maybe a bigger area on the inside where the effects are happening. I don't know. Situational. Point is, this is the easiest way that we're doing this. And I'm getting the current audio bus, which is right here inside of the inspector, because you do have to set this based on what you want. The default that I'm working with here is the sounds bus for my audio. So var CB, short for the channel bus, it's going to be whatever that default is right now, which is sounds. And then we check if CB is equal to sounds. Then we're going to set the bus and change it to the audio bus named cave sounds, and then return. Now the reason why we're returning is just to avoid having to use if else. It cleans up the code a little bit, and you don't really need an else in here in this situation, because once we hit return, the code is going to exit this function, right? So we'll change our bus to the cave sounds, which has the reverb turned on, and then we'll exit this function doing nothing else. And then next time we come through, or if I hit my button again, in this case, we're going to check our current bus. It's going to be set to cave sounds at this point. And since our if statement is false, we're going to skip right down and just set our bus to being back to the sounds. Now that's, I would say, the easiest one, because we're just saying, oh, if this is a bus, change it to this. Otherwise, it's default. Now, method 2, I'll go ahead and let you listen, but it's going to be the exact same result here. Right. And the second method here is, of course, on my button press again. And this is where I'm using the variable at the top that I set as reverb on. I have it set to false by default. And we're just going to check if reverb on. Then we're going to set it to false. We're going to get the index of our sounds bus. And then we're going to set the bus effect to be enabled or disabled. In this case, we're setting it to false, so we would be disabling the bus if it's already on. And then returning to exit out of that. Same reason as with method 1. There's no reason to have an if else when we could just break out of the function error early. Right. So if our reverb is already off, then the if statement is completely, or the if block is completely skipped. And we're just going to turn the reverb on, get the index, and then set our bus effect. And even then, we could take our index here and we could just move it up here outside of the if block. And then we don't have to repeat that specific line of code if we wanted to. But yep, there you go. So there's the second method of doing that. So the first method is we're completely changing the audio bus that sounds are coming out of. In which case we're talking about one specific stream player. But obviously if you have a bunch, then you might want to go with a group and then grab all of your stream players inside of that group and change their bus. Whereas in our second method here, we're just changing the effect, or enabling and disabling the effect as we need it, using just the sounds bus. But alright, there's 2 methods to achieve that, and that'll give you an idea of how you can play around with effects a little bit by turning them off and on, or completely changing your audio buses. So with that, take care, have yourselves a good one. If you have any questions or anything that you want to see going forward in the future, by all means leave a comment down below, and see you in the next one.